I'm Zara Kadri, and I'm a senior analyst in Atkins. I'm part of our digital asset management practice. I'm on the Institute of Asset Management NxtGen Committee, and I'm also a mathematician. Yusuf is my co-host on this webinar, so he will introduce himself and go through the integrity moment next. Recently, someone mentioned that we're talking too much about race, but then that made me react to that question by saying, are we then talking too much about mental health? Are we talking too much about gender inequalities, about LGBTQ? But there is never a moment where we can talk too much about a topic that's so close to people's hearts and also has an impact on different groups of people. So having these conversations is good and it's positive because it allows us to all support each other through changes, through movements, and see how we can impact and make a difference on our work going forward and how we can work more collaboratively. So I would like to now pass it on to Yusuf to firstly introduce himself and talk through the integrity moment.
Thank you, Zara, and good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Yusuf. A little bit about me. I've been with the Institute of Asset Management NxtGen Committee for around 1 year now, alongside Zara. And I've been working at Atkins for around 2 years now with the digital asset management practice situated within the transportation sector. And I'm currently based in Manchester, UK. So I know a few of you are dialing in from abroad, and welcome. Next slide, please, Zara. So our story starts off with an emperor in the far Middle East. This emperor has no heirs and decides to summon children from all around the empire to his palace from all different walks of life. A seed is presented to each child with a request to return in 1 year and show what they've grown. The winner will become the next emperor. Our story now focuses on Zain, a child from a poverty-stricken family of mixed minority ethnicity. Zain begins to worry that his seed isn't growing after a few weeks. And after 6 months, Zain's seed still hasn't grown, whilst all of the other children are talking about the wonderful plants that they've been growing. Zain goes to their mother the next day and asks, should I plant a new seed? But the mother advises Zain to be honest, to have integrity, self-belief, and explain to the emperor on the day what's happened. A year later, the palace is filled with all of the children's exotic plants, and as well as Zain's empty plant pot. The emperor scans the room and cries out, "My, what beautiful plants we have here," and then spots Zain at the back with an empty pot. He asks the guards to bring Zain forward, and at this point, Zain is terrified. And all the children are laughing at Zain, laughing at the empty plant pot and the failure. The emperor looks around and smiles and declares that Zain will be the new emperor. Naturally, all the children are in disbelief. Why Zain? A failure, empty plant pot. The emperor looks up and continues by explaining to each child, "A year ago today, I presented each of you with a seed, but all of those seeds were boiled, meaning that they were destined to never grow." So that's the end of that story. And I think in terms of the morals of the story, what I took from that, naturally, honesty and integrity, believing in yourself in the face of adversity, and for all the other kids laughing at Zain, showing some empathy, some understanding, support, rather than ridiculing and tearing down someone. So that's the end of that. Thank you. I really do hope you enjoy the rest of this webinar and find it useful and engaging.
Thank you, Yusuf. I'd also like to mention, please make sure you're all muted and your webcams are turned off, just so that we can save some bandwidth. This talk is being recorded, so we should be sharing this at the end of the webinar. And if you have any questions, please could you save them until the end, and we would be more than happy to continue the discussion in the Q&A session, and also afterwards we will provide the contact details with you. So our speakers today are Alexandra Knight. She is a Technical Director for AME Strategic Consulting. We have Leela Taxi, who is an Asset Management Director for Highways England. And we have Ashley Barrett, Director for Meliorette GmbH. Apologies, Ashley. I will now hand it over to Alex to talk through her slides and introduce herself.
Great, thank you so much, Zara. Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to this event. It's really exciting because I think this is the first time we've had a specific event at the IAM discussing diversity and inclusion. I was part of a launch at one of the IAM events a couple of years ago where we talked about women in asset management, and I'm really pleased that one of the core objectives of the IAM is to look at inclusivity, and that we are progressing with a group in the IAM that is purely looking at inclusivity, and I'm part of that group led by Derek Dunkley. And I'm just so pleased that we are making this part of a regular conversation now, because it's so important in every aspect of our professional lives. And it really is, for me, a big part of the asset management big picture, how people bring their whole self to work and how people collaborate and work inclusively together. So I'm so happy, and thank you so much for organising this NxtGen committee. So I'm currently a technical director at AME Strategic Consulting. I specialise in asset management and help clients in all different market sectors with their asset management challenges. I'm an engineer by background, but have sort of moved into asset management over the years. It fits with me, I suppose, as in my personality, in terms of liking to see the big picture and seeing how to connect the dots of things around me. I've also founded a small business called STEMazing Limited, which is all about STEM inspiration and inclusion, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. So if we go on to my first slide, please. So as I said, just a quick, what I was asked to do, sort of I suppose a brief history of my career to date. And it all started off with engineering, where I went into Brunel University to study mechanical engineering. And then after that, I thought I wanted to go into medical engineering. So I went to Imperial College to do a biomedical master's. And then my first job was in a medical engineering company, which I loved. But I sort of felt like I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't seeing the big picture. I was focusing on one element of engineering. And so I then chose to join a consultancy, and I joined Fraser Nash Consultancy with the intention of getting a much more of sort of breadth of experience in the engineering world in different sectors and working for different companies. Because essentially in a consultancy, when you start a new project, you're kind of starting a new job. A whole host of new challenges to tackle, new people to get to know and work with. And I thought I'll work there for a couple of years and kind of get experience of that. And I ended up staying for 11 years because I loved the variety. I was learning something, being challenged every day. And I worked on projects you can see there, from submarines to rehabilitation equipment for injured soldiers, through to energy projects, travelled out to Thailand, worked with an energy company out there, and just really I moved from engineering, sort of more, so I suppose, traditional engineering design and development, into seeing the big picture, into systems engineering, and then into asset management. And the IAM was actually a big part of my journey, because that was where I really learnt what asset management was really about and met like-minded people. And I used to go to some of the NxtGen meetings in London, and just sort of fell in love with that profession, I suppose. And then I moved to AME Consultancy, where I work now, and I have again worked on some fantastic projects, more in the digital asset management space, which has been a fantastic experience for me. One of my favourite projects was working on the Forth Road Bridge crossing and helping to turn that into an intelligent bridge using artificial intelligence to predict what is going to happen to the bridge and then link that into the decision making that the engineers have to make about how to operate and maintain the bridge. So it's been a fantastic journey for me in my career, and I'm looking forward to continuing doing more in asset management. And along the way, the piece about diversity and inclusion has just become this stronger and stronger sort of, I suppose, almost like need in me to be involved in that and to drive better diversity and inclusion. Obviously, engineering background is not exactly the most diverse sector. When I did my degree, I was one of 10 women out of 100 who started and one of about 5 who finished. And I've always felt like whenever I worked in project teams, which I do a lot in different project teams, whenever I worked in teams that are more diverse, 100% categorically I can say we have better outcomes. We have definitely more innovation and more fun, to be honest. You know, it's a more enjoyable way of working. Getting those ideas sparking around is fantastic. So that's when I sort of really realized this is what I want to focus my effort on. It's actually around diversity and inclusion. I'm really privileged to be a part of the inclusion group in the IAM. And for me, when I started really focusing on that, I felt like I started to raise my profile, won some awards around it, and felt like, you know, this is almost my calling in life. This is what I'm meant to do. And definitely once I had my kids, you can see a picture of my kids there, I realized the importance of flexible working, how that supports diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And I really started to have a focus on this, hence me starting STEMazing as well. So that's a very brief sort of potted history of my career to date. The next thing that I was asked to do was also give you examples of a typical day. And of course, being an engineering consultant, there is no typical day. It's a whole range of things, from project meetings internally through to doing client meetings with a range of different clients, which could be projects I'm running or involved with, but also prospective projects, new projects we're trying to kick off. So I get involved with actually doing work myself and reviewing and approving other bits of work, writing proposals, team meetings, and also in consultancy it's important to get involved in business development and growing new business, and that's a part of my job that I've always loved, being a consultant. And I should say, I suppose, a bit I missed out from the previous slide is that I work part-time, and in my non-AME working days, I'm also a visiting professor with the Royal Academy of Engineering. So I'm back at Brunel University, where I sort of started my engineering, and teaching there, doing workshops there, and doing a lot of mentoring for women in engineering and computing. And so I'm really fortunate to have this mix of kind of different types of work I do in my professional life, and that I can integrate that with my home life and around being able to do the school runs and things like that. So that's kind of what I've strived to be able to have that balance. So yeah, definitely no such thing as a typical day for me. And then yeah, so for me, diversity and inclusion has kind of like consumed me for the past few years, in that I just love conversations I have with people about the importance of diversity and inclusion, what diversity and inclusion means. There's so many different facets of it. I'm also on the board, a trustee on the board of the Women's Engineering Society, and a huge part of that is how do we promote and support women in engineering and try and increase the number of women going into engineering and applied sciences. And that starts at school or before, you know. And so I feel like the work I do on sort of with the universities and at work is definitely necessary in terms of retention and progression of women in technical fields, but I wanted to do more STEM outreach and sort of link up everything that I'm doing in my life into one sort of core area of focus, which is why I set up STEMazing. And it's got two elements: Amazing Kids, which is about outreach, inspiration, going into schools, STEM clubs, STEM competitions, and then Amazing Women, which is about mentoring, coaching, supporting women in STEM, and also helping women feel more comfortable being role models and raising their profile, because that's what the younger generations need to see. You can't be what you can't see, and we need more visible role models of a whole range of different diverse role models. So it's fairly new, and I started it this year, but I am definitely 100% dedicated to it, and really hope to see it grow. So watch this space.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I've been watching your journey on LinkedIn. This is absolutely amazing, and I definitely resonate with the you can't be what you can't see. So thank you. I'll now pass the baton on to Leela to introduce herself.
Okay. Hello. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. My name is Leela Dakhti, and I am director of the director for asset management in Highways England. I have to apologize because I've only just returned back from holiday, so that's my first day back, and therefore I have done minimum preparation for that. I was panicking talking to Zara earlier. So I'll move on straight to the next slide that Sarah has very kindly put together for me. So my career highlights. I am a civil engineer. I got my degree from the University of Athens quite a long time ago. I don't want to remember how long ago. And I moved into the University of Birmingham to do a postgraduate degree on something called Highway Engineering for Developing Countries. My aspiration was always to work overseas, mainly around Africa. I was so keen to work in Africa. So a course on highway engineering for developing countries looked like the right thing to do. I graduated in 91 from Birmingham, so you can see why I don't want to remember how long ago it was. And I started working at the university straight away as a research associate, then a research fellow, and eventually I became a lecturer and later on a senior lecturer in originally pavement engineering, but what transferred to be from pavement engineering to pavement management to maintenance management and eventually asset management. Just before I moved on from the university, I was asked to give a lecture on asset management, and I had to go on the internet, which wasn't as popular as it is today, and find out what asset management actually meant. And the more I started reading about it, the more I understood that asset management was something that was simply common sense. It was very much based on what we should be doing to look after our assets, whatever that infrastructure asset might look like. I joined Atkins, stayed with the university for about 10 years, more or less. I can't remember exactly how long. And then I moved to Atkins and I worked in the team that Zara and Yusuf currently work. It was called something different at the time. It was called, I think, pavements and asset management or something. I can't remember the detail. Anyway, the work that I did in Atkins was taking what we learned in terms of theory and implementation at the university on an academic background, combining with the work that actually the Institute of Asset Management was doing in its early days, and doing something practical for the highway sector. I focused the early part of my career in the highway sector, then we widened a little bit and did a little bit of work in rail, a little bit of work in water, but focused very much on highway, and now I'm back in Highways England, focusing on highway very much. So the work I was doing in Atkins together with my team, we were looking very much at practicalities. So first of all, we did a lot of consultancy with the government and the Department for Transport in particular to try to set the policy for asset management in the road sector, very much looking about funding, investment planning, accountabilities, responsibilities, technical governance, and how do we make practical solutions? How do we understand why we go out and patch potholes? And how do we link that with the strategic priorities of its road authority? I also work with a number of road authorities themselves, local authorities, Transport Scotland, Highways England, Highways Agency as it was at the time, the Welsh Government, Transport for London and so on, to take that national guidance that we were developing, the national policy, and implement it. Following that, I left Atkins about a year and a half ago, and I joined Highways England as the Director of Asset Management. And I am very pleased that I am now leading the Asset Management Transformation Program for Highways England, really taking us into the future, looking forward about what does digital mean, what does customer mean, what does safety really mean in terms of asset management. Only this morning, Alex, I had a presentation or a discussion with some of your colleagues about the work that you will be doing with us on the 7 bridges on asset management. Very much, you mentioned bridges, that's why I mentioned it. Very much learning from what you did with for the 4th bridges of the border. I've been involved with the Institute of Asset Management from its very early days, and it's like yesterday I recall the publication of PAS 55 in I think it was December 2008, and how much work we've done to get PAS 55 published, and then of course how much effort we put into publishing the ISO 55000. I've been involved with the Institute of the Institute of Civil Engineers. I was in a couple of their panels, particularly around the professionalism panel, about how do we encourage young people to come to the profession, and how do we understand technical career paths, how do we encourage people to do the technical work they want to do without feeling they have to become managers if they want to be promoted. I've also been involved with the with PIAC, the World Road Association, very much around asset management technical committees, but I have recently, well, not recently now, 2 years ago, I took on the chair of the UK National Committee, or the PIAC National Committee, and only last year I was very proud to be elected a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. So Alex, here is another common point, we've got connections with the Royal Academy of Engineering. I recently joined one of the admission panels, the membership panels in the Royal Academy, where we talked a lot about developing a program called Fit for the Future, where we look about diversity and inclusion. How do we make sure that the Royal Academy embraces all the different diverse groups, and make sure that we're representing the wide range of engineering work that is happening from the diverse groups. I don't have a typical day of work. I just, apart from the last few months with COVID, that it includes a number of Teams meetings from 7:30 in the morning until 7 in the evening, a typical day could include, it doesn't exist. It includes anything from dealing with bridge strikes, dealing with the Department for Transport and our investment planning for what we're going to do in the next 5 years, patching of potholes, as I said earlier, to the transformation of asset management, all sorts of things. Learning from colleagues outside Highways England, bringing learning from other sectors, and so on. So there isn't such a thing as a typical day. I really look forward to the discussion later today. Thank you, Zara.
Thanks, Leila. I hope I have a career like yours. Something you forgot to mention is that she's involved with a lot of international and national conferences. So thank you.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
I will pass it on now to Ashley Barrett. Also, just bearing in mind, we want to have a good discussion. So thank you.
Yes. Hello everybody, and it's really delightful to be part of this. And in fact, actually, you know, as a white male, I do feel a little bit like a fraud in the session here, but hopefully can contribute to it. So next slide, please, Zara. Thank you. I guess I spend most of my time with people, and I think that actually that's my passion, and perhaps why I'm actually part of this group today is that I really believe that for us as asset managers, and also for us as professionals, actually people are what who does asset management. People do asset management, and so actually you know, that's really my first and perfect love for being part of this profession. I've spent a long time building infrastructure throughout my career, and I think that the last 10 years when I've been involved in the Asset Management Institute is where I really started to really bring together some of all of the experience and learning that I've had over the years. So look, I am really looking forward to today, and so let's move to the next slide, please, Zara. Thank you. there isn't any typical day for me either. Like Alex and Leela, I am very excited that, in fact, actually, I don't have a great deal of plan to my day, and in fact, that's what makes it exciting. I'm often dealing with clients, trying to understand their problems, or actually trying to support my colleagues with delivery of projects, initiatives and programs. And obviously my focus is the English-speaking community, but I have spent a lot of my time overseas, and the adventure of working with people from around the world is something that really excites me. Next slide, please, Zara. So Zara asked for a career highlight about diversity and inclusion, and I thought, well, actually, I would take everybody back to almost the start of my career in 1988. I think this was year 2 of my career postgraduate, and I lived in China for 6 months. Really in a time when very few Western people had an opportunity to actually be in China, let alone live there. And I think actually the time there gave me a real appreciation about different cultures, different ways of thinking, different ways of being. And so I still draw on that today in the work that I do. I think when I try to think about inclusion and try to think about diversity, it's around trying to put yourselves into the shoes of the other person who might have a very different cultural lens to the one that you have. So really great to be here, and let's get on to the conversation. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Ashley. I'd love to be part of building something like this as well. So our first question is, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you? So I'm going to first hand this to Ashley, and then you can all discuss.
Yeah, look, I mean, maybe what to reiterate what I just said there about putting yourselves into the shoes of the other person. I mean, I think we're increasingly part of a global world, and you know, one of the things around the last 6 months has been that, in fact, it doesn't really matter where you are, you can engage in a conversation. So I think my working career has been largely international, and I'm sure that actually going forward for people who are entering the profession now, that is going to be the way that they will live their careers too. And so diversity and inclusion for me is really around trying to empathize or to connect with people from different backgrounds, cultures, ways of believing, and trying to draw your own pathway through that. You know, I think that it is important. We've been talking about this conversation throughout my whole career, and I guess, you know, I really applaud Alex and Leela for the work that they do in promoting inclusion, because you know, I don't want us to be talking about this in 25 years' time. We need to be doing it, and we need to be practicing it. Yeah, lots to talk about.
And Leela and Alex, how do you feel about this?
Shall I go, Alex? Oh, you go first and I'll go next. Go.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, diversity is just making the point that, you know, we are all unique individuals. Everybody has a different set of strengths, different experience, different background. And when you, and the inclusion part of it is actually being able to bring that to the party. So if you are able to kind of form teams, form groups of people that can come together, work together, bounce ideas off each other, and really be able to capitalize on that unique difference that everybody has, then that's when you get the most out of it, and that's relevant to asset management and every other profession. So I think that's the bit for me, that when I think about what does diversity and inclusion mean to me, it's about recognizing that everybody has their unique strengths. And some people don't even realize their own unique strengths, and they only see their weaknesses. And that's where we need teams to build each other up, and where I might see something in someone else they don't see in themselves, and help them realize that, and then help them bring that to the party. And then maybe someone else will recognize other people's differences. And I really think that once we start to develop a culture of bringing each other up and focusing on strengths rather than where people are weak, and making people feel bad about that, and making people feel almost ashamed that they can't voice their idea in case they get it wrong, you know, that's where we need to be moving to as part of real inclusion.
Thanks, Alex.
Yes, I agree with that. I don't have much to add. I don't want to be repeating. I do like, however, Ashley's point about it will be great when we come to a point where we stop talking about diversity and inclusion, because it's part of everyday life and it happens. I think, though, there are just two things to add to what everybody else has said. First of all, a few years ago, when we started talking about diversity, not started, but when we were talking about diversity, we were very much focusing on the men and women agenda. So we wanted more women to be included and being part of the professional landscape. We have moved on from that. And of course, there's great recognition of the great work that has been happening to include all different diverse groups. There is a lot of focus now on Black Lives Matter, and rightly so. That doesn't mean that it's very important that every time, at one point in time, we focus on one of these diversity groups. We need to get to a stage where everybody is included, every diverse group is included, and has the same and equal opportunities. That doesn't mean that one of the groups gets more focus at some point and therefore more opportunities. It means that everybody at all times gets the same opportunity to be included and to be given the opportunity to develop their career and what they want to do in life. It doesn't mean that, for me, it doesn't mean that we need to focus at one, but we need to focus on all the wider diversity agenda. Although I do recognize the way it was described to me was that if you go to a neighborhood and there are many houses and there is a fire, you will need to go, the firefighters will need to go and focus on the house that is on fire at the time. It doesn't mean that the rest of the houses are less important. It just means this is where you need to focus at this point in time. And that's what Black Lives Matter has done at the moment. It brings the focus because there's a specific problem. That does not mean that everybody else is less important. And that's what diversity is.
Thank you. It's brilliant answers from all three of you there. So that moves on to my next question. So how do you promote inclusivity? And you can also mention whether that's inclusivity or diversity or both. Leela, do you want to start with this one?
Okay.
As
Thank you. How do we promote? Well, by being role models, by actually trying to close our eyes to the name of the individual, to the color of the skin, to their gender, to their sexual preference. Do not consider that when you are making a decision about a new job, about a career opportunity, about assigning a project to an individual, or about ourselves, about joining a company, choosing our new boss, our new employer, and so on. And if we do that, then we become role models. I do take, again, I'll go back to the point, we're going to do that. We're going to promote inclusivity, but not talking about it, by demonstrating, by being the role model that is inclusive and embraces diversity. I have worked in teams that were very diverse. The team in Atkins was very diverse, and the team that I work with now is very, very diverse. And they are fun. Diversity is not only because it's the right thing to do and it is fair and because we have quota to meet. It is actually great fun to develop, to work with people from diverse backgrounds, learn new cultures, learn new languages, learn new habits, and learn a different way of thinking. So that's how we're going to promote inclusivity, by doing it.
Alex, Ashley, how do you promote inclusivity?
I would completely agree with what Leela said. I think being role models, standing up for what's right, which can sometimes be really uncomfortable or even worrying in a situation. And that's why I feel we need to do a lot more promotion around things like majority allies, because when you are in the minority, it is hard sometimes to feel like it's safe or comfortable to raise your voice, especially if you're the one sort of speaking out against what others are saying, maybe even just disagreeing on a professional level. But it's, I think, being able to have supportive networks around you, both networks that you identify with and also majority ally networks, and everybody is a majority ally to someone else. So recognizing the role that every single person, you know, all of us have to play in promoting inclusivity, and not feel like it's something for someone else to do because they happen to be in that minority group. We all have to play our part.
Ashley, do you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Zara. I think Alex said earlier about the fact that actually we have to be active in sort of promoting inclusivity and diversity, and I think that that's my initial response to it, is that actually we really do need to actually work at it actively, because I think otherwise we're going to end up where we're in a conversation in another generation's time where we're still talking about it. So change is really, really important, and my sense around that is if we have to set targets, then we have to set targets, but actually, you know, change has to happen. The other thing I'd say about inclusivity is it's a mindset around actually having opportunities given to people who perhaps are not the obvious candidates, because I think in professional life, and I've seen it, you know, throughout my career, somebody's good at something and so they get given the same task again, and then they become the expert, and actually if they're not careful they always get those kind of activities and tasks. And so, you know, I think actually for us in the profession, when we think about inclusivity, we have to think about, well, actually giving opportunities to the non-obvious person or groups. And I think that's really, really important. And it's simple, but you know, in my experience, very effective.
Yeah, definitely, and I totally agree with the role models. To have role models is so important, for example, especially in STEM, because it's just that next generation as well, to make sure we're showing them that there is a place for them.
I wanted to add that I feel like diversity without inclusion is a complete waste of time. It actually is counterproductive. So I actually myself am pro targets. I think you need to focus on diversity and inclusion as you would any other business priority, and in that case you set yourself targets and you work out a plan to meet those targets, and you monitor yourself against those targets. But just having the diversity tick box then is not enough if those people don't feel included and they end up just leaving a year later or whatever. So it's really important to have both, and having role models that really stand for their values and support others around them. And like you say, Zara, actually demonstrate to next generation. One of the sort of challenges I've had about the work I've been doing is amazing to encourage more women to go into STEM careers. A couple of women contacted me and said, but the inclusivity is not there yet. So by you encouraging them to do it, you're encouraging them to go into a career where they won't feel welcome. So you need to fix that problem first before you invite people to sort of join the party. And I feel like we need to do both.
Yeah.
Zara, there is one thing that we should not forget, though, that is the challenge the bad behaviors. We talked about it earlier this morning when we were preparing for this afternoon. And it's important to not just do the right thing ourselves, but challenge the poor behaviors, challenge the inappropriate behaviors when we see it, because we do see things happening sometimes and we feel, well, not my fault, not my mistake. So it's actually being we said actively, you said the word actively, and that reminded me, Ashley, we have to proactively challenge the poor behaviors when we see them. I am a mother of 2 boys. They're 2 young white boys, and I want to make sure that they have fair opportunities, the same as I had, the same as my other friends have, whether they come from the UK or from abroad, whether they are white or any other color, whether they are, I don't know, women and whatever. I want everybody to have the same fair opportunities, and that is very important. And these are the poor behaviors that we need to challenge.
Mm-hmm. And I think this also brings me on to the next question, which is, why is it important for asset management to be diverse and inclusive, and how do we achieve this? So I'm going to ping this on to Alex to start off with.
So the why question is the most important one, I think, and I think diversity and inclusion is very well aligned to the ethos of asset management, in that what we're trying to do in asset management that we traditionally talk about is getting different functions in an organization to work together, to communicate together for what they're trying to achieve, to align with each other's objectives, so that we're all pulling in the same direction and we all appreciate what is going on in the rest of the business. Mm-hmm. And for me, you can't do that without having a focus on diversity and inclusion, because it's not just about different functions within an organization. As Ashley mentioned earlier, asset management is all about people, and we need to appreciate the different types of people in asset management organizations, in any organization. And diversity and inclusion therefore becomes a massive part of asset management, I think. I don't think you can have successful asset management organizations if you don't have a focus and a drive on diversity and inclusion. So I think the why is really important. You'd hope that most people already get that and we're beyond that question now, but I still think it's important to remind everybody why it's important and why it's almost a natural part of asset management. And then the how do we achieve that? That's the difficult bit. And that is, you know, a challenge that a lot of organizations are facing. And like I said before, I think treating it as you would any other business priority is the way to make sure it's actually given the time and resources that it requires. It's not just a nice to have, and you can't just rely on a few proactive, enthusiastic individuals to do this for your entire organization. It has to be a business priority. I could talk about this forever, so I'll stop there and let others.
Ashley, why is it important for asset management for us all to be diverse and inclusive?
Well, I think actually the key point for me is that it just is, because it reflects the society that we live in. We live in a diverse society, and you know, Alex has rightly said that in fact, actually, as asset managers, we reflect the needs, wishes, and desires of our stakeholders. And so, if our stakeholders are diverse, then we need to be diverse. So, you know, it seems to me obvious that's the answer to the question, but the how do we achieve that obviously is a little bit harder to actually make sense of. So, you know, I've already talked about the thing. I think that there has to be some metrics. I mean, Alex, you're completely correct. You know, I think it's a business imperative. Therefore, you know, it gets measured and then it gets managed. But I think actually we all have to step up, and we all have to actually play our own part in it to the best that we can be. And so, you know, again, as asset management professionals, we're all trying to influence others to bring them along the asset management journey. And as professionals, then we have leadership potential and leadership opportunity. And I mean, I think, you know, part of having this session this afternoon is to try to actually widen the community that's actually working on this this inclusion topic. So I think how we achieve this is we all work together, you know, potentially it is challenging. I think, you know, Alex, you're completely right. You know, there are holy cows that probably need to be pointed out and to be put on a pedestal and left there. And we shouldn't shy away from that, really, because actually we just need to move forward.
And Leela, how do you think we can achieve this? Because it is such a big topic, and you can't just achieve it in an hour's discussion. So what do you think?
I want to start with the why, though, because I think the answer to the why is very important. And the answer to the why is, well, what already it's been said twice, but it's because why would you have it any other way? Because it is the right thing to do. You know, it is as simple as that. So the how, I'm not a fan of metrics. I am not by my nature, but I do recognize their usefulness, and I do recognize it's the house on fire we talked about earlier, that there needs to be some focus. It needs to become a business imperative. So we need to focus our minds until we come to the point where it becomes business as usual. It becomes our nature in the way we operate. But asset management is a diverse profession anyway, because okay, I'm an engineer, and I understand Alex is an engineer, and obviously Ashley, you're an engineer too. We all came from an engineering background, but many of my colleagues, you're a mathematician. Joseph, I don't know what your background is, but we do need different skills. We need communication skills, we need mathematicians, analytics, proper engineering background somewhere. We need a diverse set of skills anyway, and you only get a diverse set of skills if you have a diverse team and a diverse workforce.
And I think
Leela,
that,
could I just jump in there, please, for a second? Because we actually got a really interesting question, and I think you touched upon it there. Doug Marsh has asked, can we get away from putting measures in place to demonstrate our efforts to be more diverse and inclusive? Or do you think we need to measure these things?
I think I've already have answered that. In my view,
Yeah.
metrics can drive the wrong behaviors. However, we are not on an equal basis. We're not starting on an equal footing. So we do need something to encourage us, open our eyes and see the obvious answer in front of us. And that's why metrics are important, because they focus the mind. I don't think we should have metrics there forever, but I think until we get it right, we need to have these metrics in place. I accept that.
I think so. I think Ashley said it, you can't manage what you don't measure. And if you really want to make change, you need to know where you are now, measure your baseline. You need to have an idea of where you want to get to, and you need to be able to monitor progress along the way. I am also acutely aware that metrics need to be the right metrics in order to drive the right behaviors. But I think, in all honesty, unless you are measuring progress and you do have a focus, it slips down the priority line, and your other business priorities that have metrics that are measured take the top spot in terms of priorities, and then it never gets the focus that it really needs. So for me, I've been, round and round in my head about this for years, and I've kind of gone full circle back to, actually, I think my view is it does need measuring, because otherwise I just don't think it gets the level of priority and therefore investment it needs.
I think if you don't have a metric, you don't have anything to work towards. So the metric itself can be debatable, because again, you can. When we were talking to Ashley a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned an example where I think there was a metric of 40%. There needs to be an increase in women somewhere, but should it be 50%? Should we be in an equal position in that place? Should we aim higher to make sure we're reaching that stage, or do we want that metric to be more achievable? And again, I don't know what you think about that, Ashley, but I think that was a really good point that you mentioned that time.
Yeah, so look, I'm part of a group, a Commonwealth group, and we were debating, how do we actually bring diversity into the governance group? And there was it's predominantly male focused, and so there was a conversation about bringing women into the group, and somebody suggested, well, look, actually let's put a target of 40% women, and I said, well, that can't be right, because it has to be 50%, because otherwise it's just not inclusive. And we had a debate around that, you know, as to whether targets are the right thing or not. I mean, I maintain my view, which I think Alex has said, that in fact, actually, you know, it provides a signal, and the signal has to be an inclusive and diverse signal. So having a 60-40 signal for me is not the right signal. It doesn't signal the right thing. But I know many agencies and organisations do have signals which seem to me to be quite somewhat strange anyway. Yeah.
I think there's a fear around metrics that what happens if you don't meet them? Are you going to be chastised for that? And I think that's where we need to approach this differently. Some of the figures, you know, there are real challenges. The factors involved in creating a more diverse and inclusive culture, some of them are out of our control, like the pipeline is just not as diverse as we want it to be. But I personally don't think we should shy away from them because we feel like it's too hard. I think we just need to have a different approach to it, to say, like, some of these figures are a bit more aspirational, but what should we be doing in order to help build that pipeline, in order to make sure that we have surveys in the company where people can be honest about how included they feel, and what metrics are we going to measure? I think it just helps drive that focus. And people, it's like with the gender pay gap, people sort of get very emotive about that, and some companies, gender pay gap has gone the wrong way, because they have started to do the right things and actually bring more women into the business, but there may be apprentices or grads, so it actually makes it look a bit worse. And I think but that is sort of, as long as there's a narrative and the context around it, the numbers themselves are not the be all and end all, but it helps drive the right focus.
And just on that pay gap, there's been studies on a difference in pay gap also with race. So there's just so many different things that you can look into and debate on, but there is no right or wrong answer. It's just how we approach that situation, how we approach that topic, and how we can make that change going forward. I have one more question. I'm just conscious of time as well, as we may have some questions in the Q&A. So how can we simplify knowledge sharing across the different sectors in the asset management sectors? So I'm going to give this to Leela first to talk about, because she touched on that briefly with the analytics, the engineering. And
yeah. This is actually quite interesting, because we always say asset management is asset management, and therefore the principles are the same. They just need to be applied in different sectors. I think how is by talking. So the Institute of Asset Management is a great forum for that, and that is really valuable achievement of the institute. I think we need to keep an open mind. What has worked in one sector that is providing experience and lessons learned, but it cannot be directly transferred to another sector for various reasons, because what the customer expectations are in the various sectors, the way that the different sectors are funding, the difference between capital and revenue funding in different sectors. So we cannot just pick up something that worked in water and bring it into highways. We cannot pick up something that worked in highways and try to implement it in aviation. We need to understand the sector. So this marriage of really strong understanding of the sector and very good understanding of asset management, bringing it together, making work is quite important. So sharing knowledge is absolutely critical, but not easy. We need to have the right people having the right discussions. It's not cut and paste. Cut and paste does not work.
No, that's quite, you can't just do that in real life. Quick answers from Ashley and Alex. Ashley first, please.
Yeah, it's really hard to answer this question quickly. I mean, although I suppose my immediate reaction is to simplify knowledge sharing is we just need to talk more. We need more sessions like these where we're actually just engaged in a simple exchange of thoughts, ideas, and practices. because actually it's incredibly powerful. And knowledge shared is power, not knowledge itself. So to take Leela's point, yes, absolutely, you know, fitting that knowledge into a particular practice is the key point.
Yeah, I like that, having a more agile approach to knowledge sharing, so that we can, rather than having to do everything with sort of in a very structured way, try to break down those barriers and those silos by just using the technology that we're all now so familiar with using, that we're just so comfortable with using, that does make our lives easier, albeit, Leela, like, you know, back-to-back calls from 7:30 till 7:30 is not great, and we can be overloaded. But I think using events like this to get a group of people together who are happy to share ideas is a fantastic platform, and we should make a lot more use of that.
Thanks, Alex. So I just want to slowly wrap things up and have a few questions. I hope we don't run over, but basically diversity is a mix and inclusion is making the mix work. And that's by this author. He's also got a book on the inclusion paradox. So I think that's worth having a look at. Question for you all: how do you promote inclusivity? And I'd like Yusuf just to give us the questions from the audience, please, so that we can try and address those. Sure.
We have some great questions coming in. Jared from California, and I think this might be best for you, Leela. Jared says, I understand that this panel is more focused on promoting inclusivity and diversity than our organizations, but I'm curious if any of the panelists have found clients interested in applying equity lenses applied to asset value propositions. Jared works in the transportation public sector, and his organization is working on equity criteria to apply to their resource allocation and project prioritization. He's curious to see how people are incorporating more of the people values into their asset decision process.
If I start, I am a client, and therefore I can reassure you that as a client, Highways England is really, really very keen on that. We do all the work we do is based on 3 imperatives: safety, absolutely number 1 priority, number 1 imperative; customer, and therefore the user, the stakeholder, and what they need; and of course delivery, which includes efficiencies and all the asset management agenda. For us, bringing the diverse stakeholder community into what we do is very important. And when we say that we're making decisions about how we invest in asset, taking diversity into and inclusion into consideration is very important. So from a client perspective, yes, absolutely, we're very keen to have that, to achieve that.
Thank you, Leela. Would anyone else like to chip in there? That's fine. The next question we have from Konstantin, and I think this was with regards to how you promote inclusivity. How does this apply in real estate asset management when you have different asset classes, from hospitality to the medical field, and from residential to commercial?
Alex, I'm going to assign that one to you first.
Okay, I mean, I feel like how to promote inclusivity when you've got a range of different stakeholders is that, like I said right at the very beginning, everyone's unique. You need to understand what the needs of that set of stakeholders are, which are likely to be quite varied. So you know, that takes some work to understand and actually engage with the communities to understand what their needs are as unique stakeholders, and then look at how you may need to modify or adapt the approach to the different groups of stakeholders to make sure that their needs are met, and then follow up and actually find out if it's working. And I think you can't do a one-size-fits-all approach. So to make sure that you're inclusive across a whole range of different needs, find out what the needs are, look at how you can adapt your approach, and then monitor to see if it's successful, and obviously, as in asset management, continuously improve it.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Fauzia. Apologies if I'm saying any names wrong. What is the most difficult part of implementing a diversity and inclusivity program? I'll fire this one at you, Ashley.
Thank you, Yusuf. I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a really great question, and I'm not sure I'm best fit to actually answer it, but I suggest it might be that actually setting the targets is actually hard, or even just starting is hard, given the fact that actually it's quite a it's taking that first step sometimes can be quite challenging. So I think getting started, or actually what do you want to achieve?
I would just to add that I would agree that that is obviously such a critical part of success, is to get a good start so that it's actually going to be sustainable. I think making sure you identify who the stakeholders are internally that you need support from, and making sure that you've got clear support and direction from the top. So making sure you identify who your sort of sponsors are in a way, in top of the organization, that are going to fully get behind this and ideally lead it, and identify how it's going to be done so that you actually assign resource, and allow people to invest the time, because obviously the day job takes priority most of the time. And again, like I've said before, these, the diversity and inclusion stuff can slip down the priorities, and it's very dependent on a few very passionate, enthusiastic individuals keeping it running. And in my experience, when you leave it down to those couple of individuals, eventually they get tired, it fizzles out. And so really having the buy-in from the top and thinking seriously about how you're going to sustain this will help you be successful.
I would like to add something to that, because that's exactly the point. The point is, how do we, the most difficult bit is to not just scratch the surface, not deal with an iceberg, to deal only what you see above the water. And the biggest difficulty is to deal with the part of the iceberg that's underwater, the culture, the deep thinking that people have. How do you change that? Not how do you scratch the surface? That's the difficulty.
Thank you so much, everyone. We have a few more here, 3 more. Andre has asked, considering the best goals are time-bound, what's a realistic time frame to assign to the goals of diversity and inclusion?
I want to have a go at that.
That's a very tough question, I think.
Yeah, I think it is a very tough question, but a really good question. What I hope is that my children will not be having these discussions, that the next generation will be thinking differently. I think they already do a little bit. There are signs. I was driving a few weeks ago and my son said women drivers, given that I'm a single mother and the only person who has ever driven him around was his mother. And then he said women drivers. I didn't like that, but I think my hope is that the next generation, our children, behave very differently in this area. That's not a Highways England view, that is a Lila view, by the way, just to be absolutely clear.
I think that's a powerful view as well.
Yeah, I think it's practical and I think it's really relatable. I think a lot of the answers and the discussions we've had here between the 3 of you and Yusuf as well, it is all relatable, and it's how we put that into practice. It's all very well that we'll all have these conversations, these discussions. It's difficult for us to answer that question, how do we achieve diversity and inclusion in asset management in 1 hour? But what are the next steps going forward? How can we make that difference? And things like this amazing initiative, the foundation that you have there, Alex, Leela, the work you're doing with the Royal Academy of Engineering, and Alex as well. Alex, Ashley, your views on how we can change things holistically and in practice about those metrics. It's those things that we need to focus on. And I know we have a couple more questions, but we are running over, so I'm just going to, I think, wrap things up now and thank all of our speakers, all of our presenters. So we've got Alex, Leila and Ashley. And thank you everyone for listening to this this webinar. If you do want to approach us with more questions, because there are some questions here, please email them to our nextgen@theiam.org email address. We will hopefully produce an article out of this to be published into the Assets magazine, so keep an eye out for that. But thank you again, and I think let's put a close to this discussion now.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Great event.
Thank you, everyone,
Thanks.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Are we staying behind for a wrap up, or are we leaving? Or we're leaving? Anyway, it was great to